Hey everybody, welcome back. It's time for another Nuts and Bolts Theology session. We all love these so much, don't we? Today we're going to be talking about the Arena of Orthodoxy and, if we have time, Christology. Before they encountered the Hellenized world, Christians didn't think so much about their definitions for things. They were a more poetic culture than the Greeks. And they didn't quite have the Greek thirst for systematic thinking and clear definitions, which we as Westerners have inherited. For the early Christians, it was enough to say that Christ had come, he had died, he had risen, and now he was reconciling humanity before its Creator. But the Greeks needed more than that. They needed definitions. They needed to know what the ramifications of these claims were, and so Christians were forced to be more systematic and logical in their thinking. And part of this meant refuting incorrect ideas, or ideas that were heterodoxy, that is to say, crooked teaching. You may have heard the word orthodoxy. I've thrown that word around a lot, actually. Orthodoxy literally means straight teaching. It comes from the word ortho, you know? When you go to see an orthodontist, what does he do? He straightens your teeth. If you were to go see a heterodontist, he would make your teeth crooked. Thankfully, there are no such licensed medical practitioners. One of the most important tasks for the early Christian thinkers in the patristic era was clarifying what they meant by orthodoxy, and this meant that, inevitably, clashes of opinion occurred, and heresies had to be put down. Historically, for us, this looks very brutal. This seems like a very vicious thing. It kind of puts a bad taste in your mouth, like, I don't know, Western expansionism in America. But you have to remember, we're not putting down people here, we're putting down bad ideas. These were heresies for a reason. They were put through the philosophical ringers, and they were found wanting. Remember also that philosophy, as a branch of theology, makes it its business to shape and mold tradition and to keep it intellectually accountable. So to bring this all back to the subject at hand, what is the Arena of Orthodoxy? The Arena of Orthodoxy is the set of beliefs, ideas, or doctrines that have been judged to adequately express what Christianity is all about. This naturally begs the question, well, what are these doctrines that adequately express what Christianity is all about? Well, let's take the doctrine of the Trinity, for example. Although there was no official doctrine of the Trinity in the early church, early Christians thought Trinitarianly. That is, they believed in God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Three persons in one being. And while it's very difficult to articulate in a short YouTube video what the Trinity is or what it means, suffice to say that it is three persons in one being, kind of like the equivalent of a fourth-dimensional hypercube, many shapes in one, except in this case it's many persons in one. Three persons, one being. This has left a lot of people confused, and personally I don't blame them for being confused, because this has confused just about everybody in the Christian church from its beginning up till today, even some of its best and brightest. But allow me to say this in defense of the Trinity. Allow me to go off on a brief apologetic tangent. The human mind is an incredible thing. Even the ability to add 1 plus 1 and do simple mathematics is a remarkable feat, something that we alone as a species appear capable of. And yet, for all of its mental ability and capacity, the human mind is full of prejudices. It's full of assumptions. It's full of biases, dimensional ones. We exist in the third dimension, within the bounds of space and time. We can see the first, second, and third dimensions. Ergo, we believe that everything that exists, or at least everything that we can conceive of, in our reality must exist within the first, second, or third dimensions, and all within the bounds of space and time, because it's all that we know. We don't know what fourth dimension reality looks like. And yet when we think about the fourth dimension, which who's to say doesn't exist, we look at shapes, for example. Shapes take on unimaginable qualities in the fourth dimension. They shapeshift. There are many shapes in one, and they all exhibit qualities of one another, and yet they are a constant entity. Who's to say that in the fourth dimension a person doesn't take on similar qualities? Who's to say that in the fourth dimension you can't be a single being and three persons? It's very hard to transcend this dimensional bias because we don't know anything else. We can conceive of a first dimensional being, a second-dimensional being, a third-dimensional being, but it's so difficult to think of what a fourth-dimensional being would be like. Would any of the laws that we have become accustomed to apply to them? Probably not. If God does exist, I personally believe that he is of such an incredible dimensional quality that he can move in directions that we can't even conceive of, that he exists outside of our imposed dimensions, and that there is nothing in this world to say that he can't be three beings in one person, or one person in three beings. Sorry. It gets confusing even for me, believe me. Obviously, a full discussion of Trinitarian doctrine will have to wait, so we're going to put that on the back burner, and I'm going to bring this all back, rein it all in, put it in perspective. The doctrine of the Trinity was a battleground for multiple opposing views, some of which were in the end judged to be heretical, one of which was modalism. Modalism is the heresy that emphasizes the oneness of God, the singleness of God. It completely does away with the idea that he is three persons in one being and says rather that he is one being who can juggle roles very well. He is a single God who puts on masks at different times. One minute he's God the Father, the next he's God the Son, the next he is God the Spirit. And it's kind of a schizophrenic God when you think about it. Let's look at the scene in Gethsemane, for example, when Jesus is praying to God the Father. Is he talking to himself? Is he praying to himself? Is he expressing his love and obedience to himself? It would appear so. It would appear that God is deceiving us by putting on these different masks and giving us the impression that he is three and yet he really is only one. I used to think like this for quite a while, actually, because it was the only way that I could rationalize the Trinity, but I don't go for it anymore. It sounds, like I said, a little too schizophrenic for me, so frankly, I'm perfectly fine with the fact that it's been tossed out as heresy. And on the opposite end, you've got tritheism, which is just like what it sounds. It's the belief that in three gods. It's the belief that there are three separate entities who are not conjoined in any way, shape, or form, but are actually three gods. This was tossed out as heresy as well. And it isn't very hard to see why, because Christianity is a monotheistic religion, so it would not make sense to claim that there are three gods when really there should only be one. And so we can see that modalism, for example, serves as the radical end of the spectrum that emphasizes God's unity or singleness. And on the other end, you've got tritheism, which just as radically promotes the idea that God is separate and not unified. That would fall outside the arena of orthodoxy as we have already defined it. But inside the arena, there is absolutely nothing wrong with emphasizing one or the other. Let me clarify what I mean. Within the arena of orthodoxy, the Western Church historically liked to emphasize the singleness of God. That's the direction in which it leaned. At the same time, the Eastern Orthodox Church, which broke off in the Great Schism, preferred to emphasize the tritheism side of things. It tried to emphasize that God was three separate entities. It leaned that way. But neither of these entities went so far as to promote modalism or tritheism, because those were decided as being heterodoxy, outside of orthodoxy. Last semester at school, a friend stayed behind with me after class one day to talk to the professor and get some clarification on this. And my friend remarked that the arena of orthodoxy is actually a lot like a playground. And this was an epiphany, a revelation to me, because when you think of Christian orthodoxy, you tend to think of it as a very strict affair. A kind of monism, where only one set of doctrines or beliefs are acceptable. There's only one way to interpret those doctrines. But I find that it just isn't. Because within the arena of Christian orthodoxy, you have a huge variety of interpretations or leanings, and all of them are okay. Some people would fight me on this, but I personally believe there is nothing wrong with leaning one way or the other with regards to the Trinity or any other doctrine. As long as you are within the bounds of orthodoxy, you're just fine. So to go back to the analogy of a playground, you can play on any play set that you want, just as long as it is within the bounds of the playground. And why would you want to leave the playground anyway? There are probably child molesters out there in the bushes, Stay on the playground, kid. Don't get in the van with the man promising candy, okay? Why would you want to engage in heterodoxy when they've been proven, or at least demonstrated to an extent, to be logically fallacious? And so, henceforth, in honor of my friend, I will refer to the arena of orthodoxy instead as Jordan's playground. Thank you, Jordan. That was just a mind blow for me. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Why should I believe that it's okay to be wishy-washy and lean whichever direction I want on the playground when there are denominations like the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church pointing fingers at one another saying, "You are not the true church, I am the true church"? It's true that ecumenical relations between those two denominations could be better. In fact, all denominations within Orthodox Christianity could stand to have better ecumenical relations. But we're not talking about objective cases for any one denomination. We're talking about systematic theology. And systematic theology looks at the big picture. It looks at the whole. It looks at the facts and then deduces from the facts. It doesn't necessarily affiliate itself with any one denomination. And so, I don't intend to affiliate myself with any one denomination when I'm doing these videos. I mean merely tell you how it is, and the fact is there is an arena of orthodoxy, Jordan's playground. And there are a set of doctrines that are necessary for you to consider yourself Christian. It's true. There are some things that just cannot change. But you have the freedom to interpret it in whichever direction you wish, so long as you stay on the playground. Now, I know that there are Christians out there who probably will not always give you the impression that Christianity is as open-minded or versatile as I've led you to believe it is. I mean, look at the Westboro Baptist Church. Clearly they are not Christians, and yet they put a bad taste in your mouth when you think Christian, don't they? The thing that you have to remember, folks, is that it's best to judge an ideology based upon the ideology itself, not on the people who follow it. All of this is to say that people themselves, or Christians themselves, are not the sole criterion upon which to base our judgments of Christianity, but the lens through which we view Christianity, systematic theology, is, because it gives us the biggest picture, and it is an intellectual enterprise, and that is what concerns us as philosophers when we want to criticize or praise Christianity as an ideology. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'm glad you were able to stick with me through this mess. This was a pretty disorganized video. It's all done like on the fly. Anyway, I know we didn't get to talk about Christology, and we'll save that for next time because that really does deserve its own video. I don't know what I was thinking, trying to think that I could put it all together in one video. Anyway, I will see you all later. I hope you learned something. This is The Idiot, signing out.